Hi, and welcome back to Glassbox, writing automated RSpec tests. Today we're going to have a look at writing RSpec tests using the page object pattern. We'll look at what the page object pattern is. We'll look at why we would want to use the page object pattern and actually write some code, or rather write a test that uses the page object pattern. So what is the page object pattern and why do we use it? Well, before we do that, I need to explain a few things. So really quickly, if we look at this particular page, so we're looking at our zoo site. We have links, we have text, we have various links that navigate to various different pages. If I click on adoption, for instance, that brings up this brand new page, which is the adoption page. If I go to contact, that brings up a brand new page, and on each different pages we also have different elements to interact with. So for instance, on this contact page we have different fields, we have buttons. On the adoption page we don't have fields, we just have buttons. On every single page we have this footer which has this terms link. Clicking on this terms link opens a new window. If we go to the contact page, for instance, and try and submit a form, this opens up an alert, and so on. So the main thing to take away from this is that different pages have different things on the page and do different things and display different information. So how does this relate to page objects? Well, you can actually take each of these pages and you can map them to a class, or to be more specific, you can translate a page into an object which you can then use in your test. So for instance, we can say go to the adoption page and we can translate this entire page into a class, and in that class we can write more methods to say click on specific buttons or get the title, or within this page click on some other link to go to another page, and so on. We can be as specific as we want, or we can be as general as we want. So for instance, if we were to go back to the adoption page, we can have a class representing this page, but if we look at several different pages and in particular look at this footer, we can see that this footer is almost visible on every single page. We also have these links visible on every single page. So we can effectively even write a page object just to represent these links and the footer if we want. So the page object isn't restricted to just using a page. The ideology behind using the page object is to allow you some kind of interface to be able to navigate between different pages whilst writing some kind of front-end UI driven test. The test we're going to write is we're going to navigate to the site. Once we navigate to the site, we're going to click on the contact link, we're going to fill in the form, we're going to submit it. So I'm just going to populate with some test data, and then when we get to the contact confirmation page, we're just going to print out the title of the page. I have already written a test to do this, a really basic test, which at the moment doesn't use any page objects. So let's have a quick look at that. So here I've just written a really basic test. All it does is opens up an empty Firefox, navigates to the site, clicks on the contact link. When we're on the contact link, we're obviously then presented with a contact form. We fill in the form, we submit the form, and then we just do an expect to check the title of the form. So let's quickly run this just to make sure it works. Okay, so it looks like it worked. Fantastic. So before we move on to using the page object, let's have a quick look at this. What are we doing here? Well, for starters, we're doing a lot in this test. Yes, the purpose of this test is to enter valid form in the data and submit it. But if you look at what we're actually doing, we're writing some code to open up a browser. We're writing some code to navigate to the site. We're writing some code to navigate to the contact page, and then some code to fill in the form, submit it, and then expect to check the title of the page. So we're actually doing a lot. Let's just say we want to write another test. Let's just say we want to write, I don't know, a test to enter, I don't know, invalid information, for instance, and then submit this. Well, as far as that test is concerned, we shouldn't be on that page, because if it's invalid, we shouldn't see something like that. Maybe we can not enter the email form. So that way, if you only fill in the values for 3 different fields and we press submit, we'll get an alert, therefore making the submission of the form invalid. But more importantly, if you have a look at this test, we're actually repeating various things. So for instance, we are repeating the click in different places. We're repeating sending data to specific fields. We're repeating navigating to a site. We're repeating opening the browser, and so on. So this act of repeating isn't actually very efficient because, well, for the moment we've only got 2 tests. Probably not too bad. But let's just say we build up this test over time. You're going to end up repeating code everywhere. More worryingly, let's just say certain IDs change. So where did I get this ID from? If I quickly inspect on this contact link, this is where we got the ID from. So let's just say that changes to something else, some web developer or some kind of developer. It doesn't really matter who. But let's just say there's a conscious decision made to change this, and this changes from contact_link to something like contact_link. What that's effectively done is made your test a little bit redundant, in that you'd now have to go and change this wherever you're trying to click on the contact link. More frustratingly, if you're using this link in, let's say, 3-4 different tests, or even 400-500 different tests, you'd have to go and physically change it in each and every place where you've used this line directly, like we used it here. This is a really big disadvantage in that we copy code multiple times. What the page object pattern does is it tries to resolve this issue of repeating code. So as I said, if we write a class that effectively translates, say, this page into an object, we can do 2 things from that. First, we can just invoke methods on that object, so we don't have to write out these lines of code. And second, because we've invoked a method, and ideally methods are only written once, which are supposed to do specific things, that means, say, this line of code would only exist in one place in that method, so we'd only need to go in and change it in that one place. If we use it in multiple different page objects, then okay, we'd need to go and change it in multiple different page objects. But usually there is a class for a page, as opposed to 400 different tests for a page. So even the overhead of changing it in a couple or multiple page objects is still far less than changing, say, this line of code in many different tests. So let's do that. So I'm going to get rid of this, and what we're going to do now is we're actually going to write some page objects, and I'll guide you through writing page objects. So for the moment, I'm just going to comment this whole thing out. Okay. Right. So what should we do when we write page objects? Well, for starters, we need to put them somewhere. So what I've done is I have a source directory, then a test, and in this test directory I have my test. And I want to now start writing some kind of page objects. So before I write page objects, I want to put them in a sensible place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new directory. I'm going to call it page objects. And now inside this page I can start creating pages that I will need to use in my test. So if we go back, what pages do we need? Well, when we navigate to the app, we're effectively on the home page. So we'll need a home page, and on the home page we said we'd click on contact. So we'd need a contact page. And then when we fill in the form, so if you look here, this is now the contact.html page. So when we fill in the form, we actually navigate to a different page. So this is the contact confirmation page. So at the moment it looks like we need 3 different pages. Okay, so let's do that then. Let's write these 3 different pages one at a time. So the first page I'm going to write is going to be the home page. So I'm just going to say home page. Okay, so we have a home page. We also need a contact page, and we also need a contact confirmation page. We now need to write code that basically gets all of these 3 pages or page of just talking to each other, and we'll go into how we can do that. Now I hope you understand this concept of inheritance and some practices around it. So when you have inheritance, what we do is we basically have some kind of base class which allows subclasses to inherit methods from it. So if we keep that concept in mind and just have a quick look at our zoo page, or zoo site rather, we have various things which might be, say, common to every pages, like these links and this footer and so on. So maybe we can write some kind of abstract page where we have methods that would automatically be applicable to any page object we write without having to rewrite that same method again. For instance, a good method would be to get the title of the page. That way it doesn't matter whatever page we're on, because getting the title of the page would never really change. This method would be common to every page. And there would be various other methods as well we can write. So I think we also need to write some kind of abstract page. And all of our pages would inherit from this abstract page. So what do we have? We've got an abstract page, a home page, a contact page, and a contact confirmation page, along with our test. Let's start building these page objects up. In our abstract page, what do we need? Well, we need a driver. We need some instance of a WebDriver, right? Because how are we going to run Selenium WebDriver test if we don't have a WebDriver? So we need to have a WebDriver. So that's the first thing I'm going to write. We need a driver. Now, what do these double @ sign mean? Well, when we have a variable name, so here for instance, and it's prefixed with 2 double @ signs, that basically means this variable is accessible to any class that inherits from this class. If we just did this, for instance, that would make this variable accessible only inside this class. Putting in a double @ sign means it's now accessible to any class that inherits from this abstract page class. So we need a driver, and I'm going to set the driver to nil, which is the equivalent of saying null in Java, for instance. I'm going to write a constructor. So again, to write a constructor in Ruby, we write a constructor by first using the def to define, followed by initialize, and that is effectively the signature to our constructor. And in our constructor, we're going to pass in a driver. And what we're going to do is we're going to say our driver is going to be equal to the driver that we pass in. When we think about navigating to this zoo website or this zoo adoption website, how are we going to do that? We need some kind of focal point, some kind of route entry to the site. So that route entry method wouldn't really belong on the home page, because the home page isn't necessarily used to navigate to the site, because when we navigate to the site, that is when we first hit the home page. Naturally, it also wouldn't belong on the contact page, on the contact confirmation page. So that method is a good candidate to put in this abstract page. So what I would like to say is something along the lines of navigate to app route. Okay, and in here I would put something like driver dot navigate to, and then our URL, so HTTP okay, so that would navigate to the app. One of the key important rules of writing page object pattern is that whenever you have a method that's supposed to be, say, a page object, it's actually supposed to return the page that you're supposed to navigate to, or you're supposed to transition to as a result of invoking this method. If we were to call this method, and since this method is effectively navigating to the app route, or another way of saying is going to the website, by default we always hit the index page whenever we go to a website, unless if you put in some kind of rule through some kind of build tool, but we will get into that. Let's just say whenever we go to a website, we go to the index page. The index page is effectively our home page. So that means when we invoke this method, we actually now need to return the home page. So how do you do that? Well, to do that, all you say is return the name of the class, so in this case is homepage dot new. So now when we invoke this method, what will happen is we will navigate to the zoo website, and once we've done that, we will return a new home page. We'll return a new instance of the home page. What else can we do in this abstract page? Well, I think we can probably write some maintenance methods as well, such as quitting the driver. So here we can probably say, I don't know, driver.quit. And I think we also said we can write a method to get the title of the page. So let's just say get page title, which can return driver.title. Okay. Naturally, since we're using the driver here, I think we need to do a few imports as well, or rather we need to write a few requires. So let's just do that really quickly. Require, what do we need? RSpec. Actually, I don't think we need this. Okay, let's keep it in for the moment. We'll remove it if we don't need it. Okay, require, would certainly need Selenium WebDriver. Okay, so that's our abstract page done. We might need to come back to it and do a little bit of cleaning, but for the moment, that's what we'll do. Okay, so let's just put that to a side. Let's just do a little bit of ordering. Okay, so the next natural place to go to is the home page. What do we do on the home page? Okay, so let's just say we've called this method here, which returns us a new home page. So we're now on the home page, so we're here effectively. Or to map that to the page, we're actually on this page. What do we do? Well, for the moment, all we said we'd do is just click on this contact link. We're not going to do anything else on the home page. So for the moment, that's the only thing we need to map. So let's write that first. Let's quickly write the method that we'll use to click on the contact page, or rather click on the contact link, which would navigate us to the contact page. So again, let's just say def navigate to contact, and here what we're going to do is use the driver to find the ID, if I'm right. Yep, so find the ID and click on that. So if I just quickly copy this in here, now we've actually hit an instance where I need to use the instance of the driver from the abstract page. So I need to effectively inherit from the abstract page. So how do you inherit stuff in Ruby? It's quite simple actually. All you do is use the less than arrow sign followed by the name of the class that you want to inherit from. So in this case it's homepage and then the less than the arrow sign followed by the class that you want to inherit from. So now we've effectively got access to this variable here. Now because this variable is displayed with a double @ sign, we need to do the same in our method, a double @ sign. So let's do that. So what do we want to do once we've navigated to the contact page? Well, we want to return this contact page object. So let's do that. Return contact page dot new. Now if we go back to the abstract page, look here that we've actually written a constructor. Now with inheritance we need to keep constructor creations consistent, so we actually need to create a constructor in the home page as well, otherwise it's going to fall over. So let's just copy paste this in here, and this time instead of saying @driver is equal to driver, what we'll do is we'll say super driver. What this means is this will now call its base class's constructor and pass in the instance of driver. So in other words, when we pass in the driver here, when we create a new instance of this home page class, we will need to pass in the instance of driver, which gets passed into super, which in turn gets passed in this constructor in the abstract class, because what happens is the constructor for the home page will call the constructor for the abstract page, and then it will set the driver. The reason why we're doing this is so that we have a single instance of a driver being passed from one object to the next when we create new objects. So now we would need to go back to the abstract page class to factor in this constructor that we just created on the home page class. So if we go in, you'd probably notice that this is now red. It's because we need to pass in the driver object. So that's quite simple really. It's just you just pass in the driver object. So okay, if we go back to the home page, so using this same analogy, we'd need to do the same for the contact page constructor. We'd need to pass in the driver. Oops. Okay, so like we said, when we're on the home page, we're just going to click on contact. We've basically written the method for that. I think we're probably done with the home page as well. Okay, next we'll have a look at the contact page object. So let's just copy this constructor. Well, actually, before we go, there's something I've forgotten to mention. Since we're using the abstract page, we do need to mark that class as a requirement in this class. To do that, all we say is require relative, which basically says I need the following class. So in this case, we need the abstract page, and we also need the contact page, because we're inheriting from the abstract page class, and we're also using the contact page class here to create a new instance. Okay, so now let's go to the contact page. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to initialize it. We're also going to inherit from the abstract page. Let's just go ahead and get that class in. What are we going to do on the contact page? So if we go back, we'd said when we're on the contact page, we're going to fill in each one of these fields and then press the send button. So we've got a name, address, postcode, and emailed input fields or text fields, and we've got a button. So let's quickly have a look at the source for these. So this input field has a name attribute with the value of name underscore field. If we have a look at the next one down, so address has similarly a name attribute with a value of address underscore field. Postcode has the same thing, as does the email field. If we have a look at the button doesn't have a name, but it has an ID with the value of submit underscore message. So we can use this information now. In fact, if we go back to our test, we can see that we can actually use this as a checkpoint almost now. We've let's see what we've actually done. We've effectively done this. So let's just mark it with an X. There you go. We've also done this. We are now at the stage of doing all of this. So let's copy this in here, just so we've got some reference. So what do we want to do? Well, I think we should write a method for each one of these driver finds. That way we can just reuse those methods as many times as we like without having to retype this in. Start with the first one. We're just going to say def, I don't know, fill in name. We're going to pass in the value of name, I suppose. And in here, let's just say if I just copy that in, and obviously I need to get the right driver in, and value of name I'm going to punch in here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm creating a brand new method called fill in name, in which I pass in a name, and then what driver will do is he'll go off, find some element on the page which has an attribute of name with a value of name underscore field, and it's going to send the keys name, which is whatever I provide in. And I also want this method to return a brand new instance of the contact page, so I can actually copy that from here. So why am I returning an instance of the same page inside the same class? Well, think about it. We said page objects, in particular methods inside page objects, they should return the object once you're kind of done with it. So if we fill in the name after we filled it in and we get back the same page, that means we can effectively call the same method again. So we can keep on daisy chaining calls for the same method. Obviously we're not going to do that because we want to be able to say call this fill in name method followed by an address, followed by a postcode, email, and so on. So let's do that. So this is going to be address, Oops. So the next one is going to be postcode. The fourth input text field was the email address. And the final thing was the button. So for this one, I'm just going to say submit form. And what I want to do is just click on the button. Again, put in another @ sign. So let's get rid of this. When I click on the button, assuming we've filled in all the forms, I actually want to return a new contact confirmation page object this time. Let's do that. So here I'm going to say return this new, and we're going to pass in the driver here as well. So I hope you're kind of seeing this theme of always having the same instance of the driver fed through each methods, or fed through each transition from one object, say here, to another object, say here, and so on. We said on the contact page all we're going to do is fill in the form and then press send. So let's do that really quickly. Press send. We are now on this contact confirmation page, and I said all we want to do is just check that we've got the title of that page, nothing else, not for the moment anyway. So on the contact confirmation page, if we have a quick look, all we want to do is just get the title of the page, but we don't have to write that in this contact confirmation page class because we've got the method automatically inherited as a part of inheriting from the abstract page. Let's just do that. Let's just inherit from the abstract page. Okay, and we'll put in the require as well. Abstract page. Oops. Sorry, going back to the contact page. I did a require on the abstract page, but I didn't do one for the contact confirmation page. So we need a require here as well. Okay, that's that done. So in here, again, because we're inheriting from the abstract page, we're going to need a constructor. So we can just copy that. Again, on the contact confirmation page, all we said we'd do is just check the title. And this is automatically inherited as part of the abstract page. So we don't actually need to do anything more on the contact confirmation page object. So now, let's go back to our test and actually start writing the test. How is our test going to look like? Well, what do we need in the test? We need some kind of entrance to the app. We need some kind of variable to basically hold the app, at least on the fly anyway. When I say on the fly, I mean as a starting point. So let's just create a new variable. It's called app and set it to nil. Okay. We won't need this. Okay. Let's write it before as well. Okay. So in the before, what I'm going to say is I'm going to say app is equal to abstract page dot new, and in here I will now pass in our driver, the driver which will get instantiated here. So the driver I'm going to pass in is, well, Selenium WebDriver. Okay, so this should now effectively create an instance of the Selenium WebDriver and should also pass it around every time we jump from one method to another method or one page object to another page object. In here, as a part of closing the app, I will now say app.quit, which calls this method here, which in turn quits the driver. Okay, So now we actually come to the actual test. So what do we do? Well, I want to first navigate to the zoo site. So I'm going to say app dot what was it? If I have a quick look, it was navigate to app root. So let's just copy that. Okay, so that would navigate to the root. And the next thing I want to do is navigate to contact. So it was navigate to contact. So before I go any forward, let me just explain what's happening here. So here I'm saying app dot navigate to root. So this should make sense. App is just a new instance of the abstract page, which is here, which is navigating to the root. But what this method does is, as we've discussed, this method returns a new instance of the home page. In other words, it returns this. So when it returns this home page object, it's effectively returned here, if you like. So when we call the dot operator on this navigate to root app, we're actually acting on this home page object. Therefore, because we're on this object, we can now call this method here, the only method in the class, navigate to contact, and this will now navigate to contact. So the next thing we want to do, because once we've called this navigate to contact, this should by no surprise return a new contact page object. We would now effectively be on this page, and once we're on this page, we can now call all of these methods, fill in name, fill in address, postcode, email, and then submit the form. So let's do that as well. So we're going to say fill in name. So let's just say, I don't know, name test, because fill in name returns a new contact page. In other words, it returns this very same object, a new instance of it. We can now call the other methods as well. So I think it was fill in address. Again, let's just say address test, and the next one was fill in postcode test, and the next one was fill in email. Let's just say email test, and the last thing we do is submit form. So if we go back to the contact page, the last method was a submit form, which returns a contact confirmation page object. So let's tidy this up first. So what we'll do is we'll app. What the app does is it navigates to the app root, then navigates to contact page, then on the contact page it fills in the name, then the address, then the postcode, then the email, and finally submits the form. So let's save this, in that we know once we submitted the form, a contact confirmation page is returned. So let's just say contact confirmation is equal to app.navigate to app root dot navigate to contact dot fill in name, address, postcode, email, and then submit the form. So once we're on this contact confirmation page, i.e. by submitting the form, so we're here now, what we said we'd do is quite simply assert on the page title. So let's do that. So that's effectively actually this line here, this expect really. Obviously the difference here is that we're not using the driver anymore, we're using this page. So let's just say page dot get page title, I think it was. Let me just double check. Yep, get page title. Right. So let's run this and see what happens. With a little bit of luck, it'll pass first time. Otherwise, if we get any errors, then we're just gonna have to flesh them out and fix them one by one. Oh, okay, so we got an error right away. That's good. So we got an error here saying cannot use abstract page. It's an uninitialized constant. That's because we haven't imported in the abstract page. So let's do that. Okay, so let's try and rerun the test. Oh, okay, so we've got again another abstract error here. Okay, so again we need to get the home page in this time. So here we now have an error saying abstract page. So let me just have a quick look at this. Yes, I'm not entirely sure why this error has occurred. It's saying that the abstract page isn't found here when it actually is. Let me have a quick look at my test. Maybe that will give me a clue. So I'm using the abstract page here, which is going to the home. Ah, I see. Okay, it's home page. That's why. The reason why this was complaining, although the problem isn't here actually, is because here I'm using the abstract page, but because I was only using the abstract page, the app root wasn't being picked up. So by changing the require relative page to home page instead, that should now work. In theory, in theory that should now work. Okay, so let's run this, and fingers crossed, see what happens. Fantastic, it actually worked. I was hoping it would work without any issues, but one of the good things about having errors whilst doing these demo videos is that there's a good chance you'll encounter these errors as well. So if you find these errors now and go through them together, then that's a good thing, because there's more chance of building a greater understanding and so on. But let's not run around in circles around the errors we had. Let's get back on track. Right, so what have we actually done? Well, we had this test where we were hard coding in actions, in essence, really, using the driver to open browsers, navigate to sites, click on links, populate fields, submit forms, and then using RSpec expect to check for validation against certain things. And we've already discussed why taking this approach is really bad when writing multiple different tests. So now if you reflect on what we've just spent the past, I don't know, half an hour maybe, doing all of this, well, let's think about what we've done. We've basically reduced all of this from a test perspective in our test to just some really sensible named methods. So if someone were to look at this, for instance, without actually having some understanding, they won't know exactly what's going on. If they look at this now, which quite literally is a reflection of all of this makes more sense. This says I'm going to navigate to the application, in essence. I'm going to navigate to the contact. I'm going to fill in the form, submit the form, and then here I'm just checking the title. So this almost makes a little bit more sense. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit, because we've written, say, this method, so if I go to this method here, in case if you're wondering how I did that, so in RubyMine, what you can do is when you hover over these methods, if you hold down Control and click on any method, it directly navigates you to that method. So if we click on fill in name, for instance, it takes me directly to that method. Anyway, if we have a look at this method, we've identified the name field for that particular contact page here, and we've only done it once. So if we need to, say, populate this field again for any other test, all we do is just call this method and give it the appropriate value. We don't need to worry about if this changes or not. If this does change, that's fine. We come here and we change it in one place. If we have, let's just say, 4 or 5 different tests, all which use this method, and the locator for that method changes, or the locator for the element changes, i.e. the value to get to this text input field changes, we only need to change it here, and all the necessary changes will be propagated to all of our tests without having to do anything else. One of the other benefits is we've used several different pages. So in this case we've actually used 3 different pages, and we've introduced this abstract page to kind of be a container to hold common methods such as quit and get page title. Going forward, if we have, say, more fields put in this form, all we need to do is we just need to navigate the relevant page object. So in this case it's the contact page. Just add in the method here, or another way to phrase it, add it in one place at one time, and then just use it in whatever test you need to use it for. So page objects is actually quite powerful in that it helps you to maintain the flexibility of your test as well. It allows you to extend your tests quite easily. So if you think about it, we have definitely spent more time doing this. It would have been definitely quicker just to write it out. This probably would have taken at best 2 or 3 minutes. Doing this from scratch could take, well, it depends on your experience, I suppose, but it can take some time, especially if you keep on getting issues when running the test. But if you think about it, if you have long term versus short term, this is quicker to do, gives you results quicker. Long term, this is more maintainable, easier to manage, more flexible, easier to extend, easier to manipulate. There are more advantages in taking this approach, using this page object pattern, as opposed to taking this approach, especially if you have an application where you know you're going to have a multiple number of tests testing the same form using various different permutations. For instance, a valid form, an invalid form, a test to test each field individually. In this video we've actually learnt the importance of writing page objects. We've learnt why they're important, we've learnt how to write them, and we've seen the pros and cons of using page objects as opposed to just writing hard-coded lines of code. And I hope from this video you take this theory away and use it, or rather put it to good use. And that's it for this video, folks. If you enjoy my videos and find they bring you some new knowledge or insight into writing WebDriver RSpec tests, then please subscribe and rate. If you have any questions or video suggestions, then please leave a comment below. Many thanks for watching. Until next time, ciao.